RealAgriculture.com presents Farming Forward. Sharpen your soil health expertise with cover cropping, nitrogen management, and advanced grazing. Brought to you by the Farm Resilience Mentorship Program.
Okay, so to start off, can you tell me a bit about what SWAT maps are?
So SWAT maps are a soil, water, and topography map. They're we can do variable rate inputs for our clients, whether it be fertilizer, seed, or also soil applied herbicides. We're out there mapping the fields and getting an idea of what the soil properties are, and from there then we can create those prescriptions. And yeah, so
describe a map to me. What sort of things are you going to be looking for on it?
So when we're out there getting a map made, we're looking for those specifically the topographic features in the field, any high ground, any low ground, and getting a good comparison out there. So when they're mapping, they're going on an 80-foot pass. And then when they do come across, say, some low ground or a hilltop, they make sure that they get some extra data in those areas. So then when our map developers can create those maps, then they send them off to me, and I'm out there ground truthing, and I'm looking for things such as some gravel lenses, some sandier areas of the field. That's kind of the upper zones, and then down to the lower zones, I'm looking for those high clay content soils, as well as some saline patches. A lot of the time it's looking at the different colors and stubble type, or also some different weed types throughout the field.
So walk me through the logistics of actually making a SWAT map.
Yeah, so first steps are to get the field map. So as I said, it's on an 80-foot pass. They're mapping the field. They're essentially doing it the same as our clients would with any of their pieces of equipment. Then once a field is mapped, that information gets sent off to our map developers. They create up to 12 different maps for myself to come and ground truth. So that ground truthing process is fairly labor intensive. If a field goes well, it can take as short as 20 minutes, but I've had it take up to as long as 3 hours. So when we're out there ground truthing, ideally we have a soil sampling truck. If not, it's with a shovel, and we're checking to see. First, we typically go to those high EC areas and check those zone ones, see if they're making sense on one side of the field versus the other side of the field. And then we do that all the way down to our zone 10s. Every SWAT map is zoned through 1 through 10, and so yeah, we then make sure that map makes the most sense for the field, get a best fit as we can, and then from there that map that we've chosen gets soil sampled, and after that we analyze the soil samples, work through with our clients to make sure that whatever plan that we have come up with them makes the most sense for them as well as for us, and then they can create those prescriptions.
So when you say 1 to 10 zones, is that on a quarter section, or what are you talking about? So
that's actually, every single SWAT map is going to have 10 zones, whether it's a 10-acre piece of a small little plot up to a 1,000-acre field. We keep them consistent 10 zones. That doesn't mean that each of those 10 zones is the same. So you can have fields side by side that a zone 1 in one field doesn't necessarily mean it's the same as the zone 1 in the other field. It's really kind of about the productive capability of those different areas of the field in relation to water holding capacity.
And what makes SWAT maps different from other soil and topography maps out there?
So a lot of the other maps that are out there, they're not necessarily layering in multiple layers like we are. We weight our maps usually fairly heavily on EC data, so that's electrical conductivity. And then we layer in layers such as our topography or elevation, just depending on the field. So a lot of the time you'll have some anomalies throughout a field, some low ground that is, with the EC map, is showing that it maybe should be a zone 1, but typically, because those are water holding areas of the field, they end up actually being, say, bumped down to a zone 6, 7, or beyond. So.
And now we're standing in a canola field. Canola is a huge user of nitrogen, and nitrogen use efficiency is something that you look at when it comes to SWAT maps. Do you want to kind of elaborate on how those intertwine?
Yeah, so really nitrogen use efficiency comes down to how well the plants are going to be using that fertilizer, so, or even what's within the ground. So and that really relates to the water holding capacity of the field. So those upper zones, they're typically your driest areas of the field. They're not going to be holding as much water. Down to your mid slopes, they're kind of your average areas of the field, and then you have down to zone 10s. Those are going to be flooded out areas. So each one of those responds differently to nitrogen. You're going to have losses for different reasons. Those drier areas, that's going to be losses because of it being so dry and plants just not being able to take up that nitrogen, so then it's a loss to the environment. And then down to those zone 10s where your losses are because of it being so wet, and typically then your nitrogen is leaching out.
So talk about how this information can be useful to a farmer when they're wanting to get, fertilizer prices are constantly volatile and fluctuating, and they want to get the most out of their nitrogen. Talk about how this is important. Yeah,
so they can then allocate resources accordingly. A lot of the time it ends up being we're applying actually an average rate across the field of roughly around what they typically would be, but we're applying the nitrogen in spots that actually needs it. So then we can dial back the fertilizer on those hilltops because the production capacity isn't as high as it should be there, or as it could be, I should say. And then we're allocating those inputs down to those middle areas of the field, your higher performing areas of the field. And then also, say, your zone 9s and 10s, where you're typically your most saline areas, they're going to have high residual nutrients in those spots. So then we can move those resources out of those areas into those better performing spots of the field.
And how do you actually measure that nitrogen use efficiency? So
there's a few different ways to measure nitrogen use efficiency. What probably the simplest way is it's your ratio of your crop yield versus what the crop is taking up for nitrogen. So what we can do is have that initial soil sample and then have a good baseline of what the organic matter as well as what the nitrogen levels are within the field, and also knowing how water is going to interact with the organic matter, we can get a good idea of what that mineralization nitrogen release would be from specific areas of the field. And then we can measure your yield after that and get an idea of what the nitrogen content is of the seed. And then after that, it's just simple math. You need a soil sample afterwards, and then you can see what your starting soil nitrogen was, what your end soil nitrogen, and then what came out in the seed.
Okay, and talk about how using something like this, it's not just good for the environment, but also your bottom line.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So as you said, it's not just good for the environment; it's good for your bottom line. It's you can improve yields in areas that maybe you were typically under applying, so you can improve your bottom line that way. And also you could look at a slight reduction of inputs. It's very field dependent. It's also very goal dependent on we really work closely with our clients to make sure that whatever goals that they're trying to achieve for their fields, we are working as hard as we can to achieve those goals, whether it's being increasing yields or a slight reduction on inputs.
If you enjoyed this video and want to continue to sharpen your soil health expertise, encourage you to go to farmlearninghub.ca to learn more.